I'm coming in hot.
Well, I'm Ellen. I am the founder of Cubicle to CEO. We are a media platform and an education company for women entrepreneurs. So our primary channel that we reach our audience through is our podcast, Cubicle to CEO, which I started back in 2019. So It's such a fun adventure, and I'm really excited for you and all that, all that is ahead for you on that journey. But it's been incredible through our community across all of our different channels. So our podcast is our primary media channel, like I mentioned, but we also have a very engaged email list of mainly women entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. I have a women's co-working space here in Salem, and we do live in person and virtual events. And so across our communities, we reach around 90,000 women all across the globe. And it's so amazing, the connections and the relationships and the friendships that I've made over the years through business. That's absolutely my favorite part. And, through our programs, our online courses where I teach business and marketing strategies to these amazing business owners, we've been so privileged to be able to serve more than 10,000 students at this point through our paid programs. Wow. And of course, the free content through the podcast is the way that we usually introduce people to our world. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah. So is that kind of how the podcast is that, as I'm learning more about podcasts, because what I'm understanding is a lot of podcasts don't make money. And so a lot of the stuff I've researched when I started was have something else to direct them to. So for me, having the insurance company, and through it, we've already got some new clients for insurance and just met new people, new networking. But a lot of stuff as I started researching podcasts was it's probably going to take you, if ever, a long time to make any money at it specifically. But if you have something else that you're kind of tying it to, that's where you could really get some traction, quicker. Is that kind of what you've used the podcast as a channel to whatever your businesses are, or what? Because honestly, like I said, I don't know. I creeped on all your stuff and was like, all right, there's some courses, but I don't I knew it was focused on women, but not. I didn't know exactly what are those courses teaching or whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to give a little bit of background context just so people listening in have a little bit more of understanding of where I'm coming from. But to answer your question real quick about the podcast. So in the marketing world, we would call a podcast top of funnel, right? It's what is bringing new eyeballs or new people into your world who may not know you. And it's usually leading them, like you said, to something else. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of different ways you can approach podcasting. What I started with back in July of 2019 is very different than what we're trying to build today. And back then, when I was first launching my podcast, I was in a completely different place in my business where at that point, I was about a year and a half into being an entrepreneur. And our main business at that point in time was a boutique marketing agency where we were working with clients one-on-one, managing their social media accounts, doing marketing consulting. And so the podcast at the time was really, for me, a passion project. And I didn't really understand when I started it what the purpose was in terms of how it connected to how I generated revenue, similar to what you were sharing with me earlier. But over time, and especially in the last 6 months when we shifted from primarily being an education company, creating online business courses and marketing courses for entrepreneurs, to wanting to really own our vision of being a media platform and a media company, that totally changed the trajectory of what we want to do with the podcast as well. Because as you know, in media, what monetizes is impressions and reach. And so it's really about hyper audience growth and an engaged audience. And of course, partnering with like-minded brands that want to serve that same target audience. And so it's a completely different outlook than what I had when I started with. But I think that's also the beauty that you find in podcasting, but in business especially, that so much of what you start out with is not what you end up with, right? And you can't really accurately anticipate these things.
I think it's probably always that way. I mean, I can't imagine someone's business plan where they're like, yep, this is what I thought. And then, yep, it's exactly that. I mean, like I was saying earlier, for this, out of the gates, it changed like almost immediately. What I thought was really like, we were going to sit and talk mostly about your businesses and all the intricacies and how they work and whatnot. And then it kind of, the people that were on kind of showed me like, no, that's not what we're going to do. It's going to be more the backstory of how we got there and challenges of entrepreneurship, and which, by the way, for people watching and listening, I'm not only going to have business owners on here. I also started with the intention of only having business owners, entrepreneurs. Like just today, I was saying the guy that reached out to me, he doesn't own a business. So he actually asked me, do you only have business owners on? That has changed, and now, I mean, I'm surrounded by educators, like I was earlier this morning. We'll have educators, eventually hit all the different industries and whatnot. So yeah, for this, it changed immediately.
Yeah.
What I thought it was going to be. So, and I'm sure it'll change more.
Absolutely. I think that's a given in entrepreneurship, is that you have to embrace the constant evolution of whatever you're doing. And so, honestly, when you were saying, the business plan maybe didn't turn out exactly the way you thought, I give huge credit to people who even have a business plan to start with, because that's not how I started my business. So,
yeah.
And we'll probably get into that later, but yeah, it's definitely a journey.
So, tell me a bit more about, the courses or how that works, or the structure of what you do right now for business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first ever program is one that I actually retired after 3 years this past August. So that was definitely a very bittersweet moment. And it was part of my decision to shift fully into media. So basically, the first program I ever released was also called Cubicle to CEO. That's actually where my brand name came out of. So that came in early 2019, before I had even launched any of the rest of this brand and what it has become since then. So the podcast didn't exist at this point in time. I was about a year into business, and basically the way I fell into entrepreneurship was completely by accident. I was 23 when I quit my corporate job. And I only lasted 10 months, and my parents were not happy with that decision. They were like, you're walking away from a stable job and benefits. You're fresh out of college. Why are you doing this? Mm-hmm. And I've always been a very intuitively led person. Like when I feel in my gut that something is the right thing to do, I will just make that jump. And if it doesn't make sense on paper, I'm like, I'll figure it out later. So anyways, I quit that job, and I started my business at the beginning of 2018 because I actually signed my first freelance marketing client, and it was a colleague that I worked with at that job that I had left. And it was a very small project, but it really opened my eyes to, I have this skill already. I know Instagram marketing. I know social media marketing. I have a skill I can monetize outside of a traditional 9-to-5 job. And so I decided to, right then and there, it was early January 2018 at this point, I was like, I'm not going to apply for any more jobs. I'm just going to lean into this curiosity and we'll see where it takes me. So they were my very first client, but I very quickly grew that into a client portfolio that made, 6 figures in its first year. And through that, I started getting a lot of messages from other service providers, other coaches, people who worked with clients in a one-on-one capacity. And they were asking me, how did you grow this client base? How did you scale your business so quickly I didn't even have a website for like the first 2 years of my business. So they were like, we can't find you online. Like, where are you getting these clients? How are you getting people to pay you for this? What's happening here? So it was that first program was really born out of listening to my community and realizing, okay, so people are clearly struggling with this piece of client acquisition. So I would love to share what I've learned in this space. And so that's what that very first program was. And like I said, I ran it for 3 years. We've helped hundreds of service providers and coaches and consultants all around the world. And that particular program was helping those people in that type of business model make their very first $10,000 revenue month. And the reason that we set that as a transformation was because I felt that when you make a 10K month, your very first 10K month as an entrepreneur, especially when you're a solopreneur, I think it's that first moment in time where that first big financial milestone where you're like, oh, I can really do this. Like this is happening. It opens the doors of possibility. It opens your mind to maybe I could grow this beyond just me. Maybe I could hire someone, create a job. I could serve more people in a bigger capacity. So I wanted to give people that confidence boost and that belief in themselves. And so that's what that main program was all about. And that's what we did for 3 years. On the side tangents of that, we also had several other smaller digital courses that weren't so, mentorship heavy, like DIY, do it yourself type programs where people could just self-pace through the content. Okay. So we had a handful of courses in that area, but these days, really we still sell templates and digital products like a perfect podcast pitch. Like if you want to get on shows, right? Like someone wants to pitch you for your show, we sell templates that people can utilize to grow their business. But our main program now is Pay to Create, which is a live 3-day challenge that we host a couple times a year. And we help first-time course creators turn the knowledge and the skills inside their head into an online course that they can enroll paying students for before they've even filmed any of the content. So I think at this point, we're about to enter into our 8th round of Pay to Create in November, and we've helped 1,000 people get their first courses published into the world. Yeah.
So like, let's see. So if I come to you now, primarily you're working with women, correct?
Primarily, that's who we attract.
But not solely.
We have some amazing men,
okay,
and people who identify in all sorts of ways in our community. Okay. So I mean, our marketing is very targeted toward women. The way we present ourselves online, I think we naturally attract more women, and that's the core demographic that we really serve. But absolutely, guys are welcome in our
so like I
stuff.
come to you. Tell me if I'm right.
Yeah.
I come to you and say, "Yo, I got this River City Insurance thing, or I got this podcast, the chair thing that I'm trying to grow or teach," and then you're teaching me how to build kind of a course for what I'm wanting to do. Is that what?
Something like that. So, for example, I'm trying to think of something that might be relevant to you. Let's say that you get a very similar type of question all the time from your potential clients. Maybe they're always asking you, "Hey, Trav, like I don't know if I should be buying this type of life insurance or like term life insurance versus whole life insurance, right? And when should I buy this for my children? And how is this part of my wealth planning or financial planning?" And maybe you answer the same thing over and over again, and you realize, okay, wait a second, I could take this content that I'm constantly sharing either person to person, over email, over the phone, and turn it into an online course that someone could consume on their own time. And it would help them achieve a certain goal or overcome a certain problem. And it's something that is scalable because it doesn't require me sitting in front of you explaining this one-to-one. So that's an example of something that you could create that directly ties to, your business. But of course, we've helped people create online courses in literally every niche imaginable. Like I'm thinking of, we had this one guy come into our challenge who created an online course teaching people how to build their own fences because, he really loves doing that work, and people get scared with power tools. They feel not confident. So he teaches them how to build fences. We've had people come in who help you with breath work and teach you how to breathe properly to, relieve anxiety and stress and whatever you may be dealing with. We had someone come in who teaches women self-defense. So it was a self-defense course. We've had people who help your baby sleep through the night as a new parent, and they're a sleep expert. So they create an online course teaching new parents how to get their infant to sleep through the night. Okay. I mean, literally every topic imaginable, you can create an online course about.
So the client already is bringing you the topic.
Yes.
You're helping them create something, how to expand that topic or reach more people, or you're not giving them a topic. You're not.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not creating a topic for them. we help them refine what that topic might be and how to structure it in a way that is clear and actually will attract paying buyers and is, create a course that will be profitable. So, we teach them the strategy behind actual course creation and selling courses, but they are the knowledge experts that come to us.
So I come to you and I'm like, yo, I started doing this podcast thing. It's kind of starting to work out.
Yeah.
People are digging the audio, the visual. I want to create a course how to teach people how to create this.
Yep. You could create a course like that. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Got it.
And what's so amazing is sometimes we think, oh, something is too niche. Like there's no way someone would be willing to pay for a course like that. But I was just talking to a friend who is she's in a big, executive role at one of the largest platforms in the world for online courses. And she was telling me how I think it was this one guy made $1 million from a course about foraging in the forest for mushrooms, like something so so random. And but there's a community for every interest. There's a community.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Exactly.
We made jokes about that. Me and my friends, like, you could make money on there is a if it exists, there's people out there that
there's a demand. Yep, exactly.
Okay. No, I've actually, like, as I'm getting in this space, I've thought about, I'm even encouraging some of the people that have been on here. I'm like, yo, you should start your own podcast. And they're like, no, but I've thought, like, I've enjoyed a lot of this process and I've thought, you know what? I kind of want to eventually help other people create, whatever topic. Like, I can't give them that part, right? Like, I'm doing this conversation because I'm interested in this conversation.
Right.
But I've thought, like, man, recreating different ones and helping them, kind of like the Barstool dude, who he's got like 60 different podcasts, but you don't know he owns them all because they all have different names or whatever. But I was like, that's dope. I didn't know he actually helped set all those up. But he's like, all right, Ellen, I'm going to give you a show and I'll get all the lights and this stuff and set it up. But you got to be the talent.
Yes.
You got to talk about whatever the thing is that you talk about.
Yep.
So he kind of had the blueprint. So so now I'm understanding what it is.
Exactly. And just to put it in even more layman's terms, if you're someone who's listening and you've never taken an online course or invested in an online course, just in its most simple terms, think of it like paying a university or a community college to go take a class, but instead of taking the class in person, you're taking it online, and your educator may not be, a professor at an accredited university because you're not earning toward a degree, but you can still receive education from experts all around the world in all sorts of areas on your own time with your own money.
Okay. You mentioned that you retired that program and now you're shifting more to being a media company. What does that mean?
Yes, that's a great question. I get asked this a lot. I think when I say media company, a lot of people immediately assume, oh, social media, like you create social media or manage, accounts for people. So that's what I did in the past with my marketing clients. I do not do that anymore. So I don't manage social media for people, but a media company, if you think about, I think it's helpful maybe to compare it to a well-known traditional media site like the New York Times, right? The New York Times has an online presence. It has the traditional newspaper, or if you think of a magazine like Sports Illustrated or Vogue magazine, things that you grew up maybe reading or looking at. Those are media companies, and the way they make their money is brands buy placements on their publication, and they do branded content, or they might actually just buy a straight up ad similar to that, but in the digital age. So in the digital age, websites, blogs, social content, podcasting, brands want to reach the listeners and readers and viewers online. And so they're looking to partner with smaller digital companies like mine and be able to, advertise on our platforms to reach our community. So in a nutshell, that's what a media company is, I guess.
So Barstool, do you know what Barstool is?
I'm familiar. I'm not a consumer of their content, so you might have to give me a little context if there's
they're a lot. yeah, it's a lot, but they've grown a ton, and I've just heard the comment of like, we're not a podcast anymore, or we're not a this anymore, we're a media company. And so I've been trying to understand, what are they really communicating by that? So with you explaining that, I mean, it kind of seems like you're saying we're not just this one thing. We could be doing some of this and some of this and some of this, rather than, well, I'm just a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps the shift there is, when you're a podcast, you're a single channel media format, right?
Yeah.
Whereas most media companies exist across multiple mediums. So like, that's true for us. Our podcast is our primary media show, but we also have other ways for people to find or engage with our content, both free content and paid content, whether that's through our email newsletter, whether that's online on Instagram or on YouTube, or even our virtual or in-person events. That's also a form of media if you're documenting that and creating that content, and then, sharing it maybe on your blog or website, or even selling a replay of an event.
Gotcha.
All of that is media.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have employees?
I do.
Okay.
I currently have 3 full-time employees.
Okay.
We're about to transition to 2 full-time employees. And I also work with a team of 3 to 4 part-time contractors for different projects, just depending on the need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trying to think yeah, it's not, like I said earlier, usually when I'm interviewing people, I know exactly what a home builder is. So I kind of like I know what that means, so I can ask millions of questions, but I'm trying to like understand your business and the model and how it functions.
Would it be helpful for me to share, I guess, the different ways we actually generate revenue? Like, would that be helpful?
Yeah,
in the
I was actually, because you mentioned some free stuff, some paid stuff, and then I thought, okay, what is that free stuff? What is that paid stuff? Because I'm totally a visual person, so I'm trying to like make a picture in my head. That's what I'm saying. Like, I know what a house builder is,
Yeah.
so I'm picturing the things. But then with your stuff, I'm trying to picture, what exactly is that?
Yeah. I mean, let's look at it like a pie, right? So if you're looking at all the income that we generate in a single year, how do we break apart that pie into where that money is coming from? So a large piece, especially now that we've shifted into this media platform vision for ourselves, is brand partnerships. So when brands are, like I said, buying placements, like a podcast ad on our show, or maybe they want to do a branded newsletter with us, or maybe I'm hosting a virtual workshop for them, they're paying us a certain amount, X amount of dollars for a contract. And then in return, we're saying, these are the content deliverables that you're going to receive. We're going to create for you and then distribute through our channels to reach our audience. So that's one piece, brand partnerships.
And before you go on,
yeah,
because eventually I feel like I'll be in that space. Did you reach out to them? Are they reaching out to you? Is it both ways? Because I've thought, like, eventually as that starts to happen, I'm definitely not going to just like represent any and everything.
That's so important. Yes, you cannot do that. It's the easiest way to lose trust with your people.
Yes. Yeah. So I've thought, like, I bet you as time goes on, I'm probably going to be presented with certain things where I'm like, yo, I'm not really into that. And so I don't want that to be attached to what I'm doing or this conversation or what this turns into be. So I've been curious about, like, how do you go about building those relationships, or I do want to promote that, or so I've thought, are you reaching out because you're identifying a brand you would want to be associated with, or are they
it's definitely both. I think at the beginning of anything, you're going to be doing a lot more asks than being asked. And I mean, even when we were talking earlier, you're experiencing that yourself, right? Like at the beginning, you felt like every single guest who came on your show was someone you personally reached out to and said, hey, I'd love to have you on my show. Now you're starting to get inquiries from people wanting to be on your show.
Right.
It's a similar concept there. So it's definitely both. And we work with all sizes and different types of businesses, but I would say that our primary brand partners are in the tech space because we serve business owners and entrepreneurs. We're always trying to connect our community with the best tools, software, and things out there that are going to save them money, save them time, help them run their businesses easier and grow their revenue, which is really what all of our content is surrounding, is we help business owners increase their revenue. So tech is definitely a big piece for us, but that doesn't mean that we don't, partner with lifestyle brands sometimes, or that we don't partner. Like I've partnered with basically every sector: fashion, lifestyle, business, tech, travel. We've done some amazing travel partnerships recently. So it's definitely a wide gamut, but I think at the beginning, certainly the pitching part is crucial. But I'm so glad that you brought up that point of not just accepting money because it's easy. I've turned down so many things before that it could have been easy to make a quick buck, but it is not worth sacrificing the relationship and the trust that you have with your community. And I think protecting that integrity at all costs is worth more than any amount of money that someone could pay you for, a promotion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm thinking about as I'm journeying on this. I even kind of have a funny thing going. It's kind of turning into a funny thing. Like when Kara showed up, she had no idea who Kara. I was. Yes. She said a lot of nice things about you. When Malik showed up, he was the next guest. He had no idea who I was. I've had people, they're like, yo, like, are you going to put yourself on the Instagram clips? Because that's where most people are like looking right now. If you go to YouTube, you'll see me. But I have not put me on Instagram at all.
Right.
But a part of me, like, I don't know, I'm kind of liking that. I'm kind of liking where it's all about everyone else. And the brand is getting built literally on everybody else. And I don't know, for me, there's something about, because I'm trying to put on everyone, and I've thought like, well, that's what I'm trying to do anyways, is like make it about everyone else and not me. And so even in that little way, I'm starting to be sacred about what's being created and like what I want it to represent. So yeah, I've definitely thought about, as time goes on and this platform grows, and then whether I'm asking or people are asking to partner, what does that look like? Here's a question I have. When you partner, are you kind of setting the terms in regards to here's how we'll advertise it, or are they saying here's what we want to see, or for how long, or multiple images, or like who is kind of setting what it actually looks like?
It's definitely a collaborative discussion, but I think you know your audience better than any advertiser ever will. So you have to almost think of yourself as an advocate for your audience and thinking about what is really going to be, because the best win-win-win partnerships are not just the ones where you win as a company receiving the money, or the brand wins to get in front of a new audience and maybe, I don't know, lower their cost per client acquisition, but it's really about the end user and what products and services and offers are actually going to really enhance their life and hopefully impact them in a positive way. So you have to be really thoughtful and conscientious of that. And I think for me, what I always start with the brand is trying to understand, okay, what is the thing that you're actually offering? Do I think my audience would genuinely benefit from this? If not, it's an immediate no. If it's a yes, then I try to understand from the brand's perspective in us serving them, because they're our client, is to understand, okay, what is your budget? What channels are of highest priority to you? Because we have some brands that come to us and say, we only want to advertise on the podcast. We really don't care about anything else. There are some brands who say we want to reach across all of your different channels. And we want to be really active and be part of a live activation, whether that's a virtual, workshop that we put on for them, or whether that's an actual in-person event and we want to send a representative to and have them interact with your people directly. So there's that piece. But I think most importantly, and what really directs the conversation, is trying to understand, what is the objective of this campaign? Is your campaign, is the purpose of your advertising dollars simply to generate brand awareness? That's, like when you drive on the street and you see a billboard, that billboard serves really no other purpose than to maybe bring that thing top of mind for a second and then it's gone, right? So brand awareness campaigns look very different than a brand coming to me and saying, our goal is that we want to acquire 100 new users from this campaign. And currently we're paying Facebook ads, let's say $20 to acquire a new customer. We'd like to see you generate a better return on investment than that. Which, of course, with referral marketing, when there's a trusted voice, the consumer is always going to be more likely to engage with something than watching an ad on TV. If a friend tells you, hey, you should go to this restaurant, you're more likely to go to that restaurant on your next date night than when you see that ad pop up on TV. So with the future of media, I think being so centered around creators and individual personalities, as you're seeing even with this podcast, it's like if you mention, hey, we're recording this, this with this type of mic, this podcast, someone who wants to create a podcast is probably going to go, oh, I heard Trav say that he uses microphones, so I'm going to go on Amazon and go buy that. They're more likely to do that than flipping through a magazine and saying, oh, there's an ad for this microphone. So kind of a similar concept. I center the campaign around whatever the brand's main success metric is. And then we try to work backwards and go, okay, what type of content would help us achieve that goal? And where does that need to be seen? And how many times does that need to be seen for our audience to actually take action on that?
Okay. Yeah, that,
Sorry, that was a lot of information that I just unloaded.
No. Like I just think about, like, I see where all this is going and eventually having all those conversations. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do this in a way where position myself where I have other businesses. And so I don't need to make money from this, but I want to, because this is what I love to do. And so if I could start, down the road making some real money at it, then traveling and doing interviews or the documentary I was telling you about, or bringing people in, because like I was saying, I think I'm going to be very stingy on, I'll only do in-person interviews. Even if it might be, we're like, yo, this person's famous, and I'm probably going to be like, I'm not going to do it. Like, I don't know, like just building.
But that, again, I think is you protecting the integrity of your show and the quality that you want to deliver to your listeners or viewers if they're watching this on YouTube, right?
Yeah. You know what your people want, and you're not willing to sacrifice their experience to get a famous person on your show. And I think that speaks volumes to, the trust and the long-term relationship you build with your listeners.
Yeah. Gary V I've watched multiple things on him. And I mean, I'm so different than him. He's got a motor that goes a million miles an hour.
He's real in your face.
But one thing that I definitely resonate, and I've said it multiple times on here, is he's a huge proponent of just being yourself.
Yes.
Don't try to be anyone else. And with this, all this kind of stuff, I think it's easy to be like, yo, I should maybe talk like this or have my podcast a little bit like this. And I've really tried to be like, nope, I'm just going to do Trav. And if that works, then it works. And we'll just see who that works for. But I just have to be me. That's the only way, like long term, it'll sustain itself. It'll be authentic. I was having the conversation with my buddies today after he spoke. We're like, well, how'd that feel? Because we're thinking like he just killed it, and all these people are like, sign my book and all this kind of stuff. And, for him, he was like, oh, I was nervous and I didn't know how they were going to, and we talked about how, and these are two dudes that are leaders, and if you met them, you would think they probably didn't struggle much with some of that.
Right.
But like we talked about how, like it is difficult to just be yourself, that's okay. That is okay. Like people see what you do, and even Kara referenced it a little bit, and like, you can't be Ellen. You got to be Kara.
Yeah.
I can't be my friends that I've compared myself to. I just have to be me and be me to the best of my ability.
I agree. That's your magic, right? That's what attracts someone to want to be part of whatever it is that you're creating or doing. Is it's you, and only you can, even if you, and I say this all the time, especially to first-time course creators who feel imposter syndrome. They're like, why would anyone want to learn from me or pay to learn from me when they could learn from someone else? And I always tell them, well, look, even if you and I sat literally next to each other and regurgitated the exact same information, just because we're different people, our delivery is going to come across different. it could be as nuanced as, oh, someone likes your voice better than mine or whatever it may be. Or it could be as profound as, we've lived through different life experiences. So even if we're talking or sharing the same information, it's filtered through a different lens. And so the way that it comes across is just different because you add your own, your perspective on it. And so I think that's the magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so much easier said than done.
Yeah,
it really
it's
is.
Hard.
Like I'm definitely having to be very purposeful with that in this space and continue to be like, nah, just talk the way you talk, just be how you are, and we'll just see what it is and whatever. Because I think it's weird when when it starts to work. Like that sounds funny, but it's like. It's weird when it's like, yo, like my buddy today, right? They paid him $10,000 for 1 hour of speaking, right? And it's like, yo, like, but then me and my other good buddy, we experienced that. And to be honest, I'm like, I think it was worth, like,
yeah.
I haven't said this to my friend, but we'll hang out later tonight and I'll tell him this. But after experiencing his presentation and everything, and he also, he authored the book, he did some poems for an hour, and I was like, and then watching all the reaction of all the people and all the books that they bought, and I thought, you know what? Like, I think it might have been worth it. That's a weird valuing yourself and... even for me, as I eventually start to think like it'll be weird when someone's like, "Yo, Trav, I'll pay to like put my cup on your table."
On the table.
I'll be like, "That's weird." Like that's a weird thing. But I think the imposter syndrome that's been talked about multiple times on here. I certainly felt that when I started doing this. Like I'm not a podcaster, but just I don't know, owning that about me is good enough. And I'm just going to be me at the best of my ability and stick with it long enough to see it work rather than just give up on it too early. It's a lot easier said than done.
100%. And I think, people often on the outside looking in, when looking at someone's success story, they think, oh, you've got it all figured out. But really I think it's not that as you become more successful, you have no problems. It's really just your problems shift and they change, and the challenges that you face look different, and everyone has those same challenges, but they will adjust to your experience level or the stage of the journey that you're in. And so, I definitely feel that. But I personally, I will say, I feel like I have a take on imposter syndrome that has really helped me over the years, which is that I think imposter syndrome shouldn't be looked at as a detriment or a negative thing that you're supposed to overcome. People are always like, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And I don't think that should be the goal, because to me, imposter syndrome says that you, are someone with high integrity that actually cares about the people that you help, right? Because if you didn't, if you were truly in it just for the success and the money, why would you have any imposter syndrome? There's nothing to fear. Like even if you failed and you failed your people, if you didn't care, what would there be to feel an imposter about? And so to me, it shows that you actually care about the people that you help. And the second thing I think that imposter syndrome shows you is that you are not done learning and that you are a student of life, because if you remain curious, you will always realize, no matter how much of an expert you are in something, I think the people who are at the top of their field, they're the ones who are most acutely aware of how much they don't know. The analogy I always use is like when you're in kindergarten and you learn 1 + 1 = 2 and you master that, you're like, yes, I'm so good at math. And then you go into, high school and college, and you're like, what the heck is an imaginary number? I don't understand this algorithm. Like, you learn all these things that make you realize, oh, back when I only knew my corner of the world, I thought I was the king or queen. And then you go out, and the more you become an expert at something, the more aware you actually are of how much you don't know. So to me, imposter syndrome shows that you are constantly learning as a human, and that should be an advantage and something to celebrate. So I would really encourage anyone who struggles with imposter syndrome not to take it as something a weakness of theirs that they should somehow hide or overcome, but rather to embrace it, to celebrate it, and to realize it says two very positive things about who you are as a person, and to realize that, yeah, like fear is always going to be with you, but you can have an amazing adventure with fear in the passenger seat.
That's a good perspective. I have
Thank
not
you.
heard anyone have that perspective on imposter syndrome.
It's helped me, so I hope it helps someone else.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that. We talked a lot today just about perspective, especially with what John shared with how he was brought up, and we all experience different things and different perspectives, and how you can have 20 people in a room and they could all see something, but all have a different take on it.
Yeah.
But I've never heard someone talk about it like that. So yeah, thank you. That's every time I talk with someone, like I'm like, yo, I keep learning new stuff. Like every time someone says something in a way I didn't think about, I didn't look at it that way. All the information like and value I've been getting from hearing people's story. And that is a new one that I've never really saw that side of it. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad I could offer a new perspective.
Yes. One thing I noticed on like your social media is that you have put out like your revenue, like what you've generated. I've been curious about that. A lot of business owners, that's the last thing they want to talk about, and we do insurance for businesses, and sometimes it's like, yo, I got to ask you, how much money does your business generate? Because it's part of how the rate is for the insurance. But it seems like you're definitely talking about that. And so I'm curious about that.
Yes. So it is something that goes against the grain of what we are brought up thinking is appropriate versus not appropriate, right? People always say, don't talk about money, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. Like those are the things that you just don't talk about unless it's with maybe a very close person or trusted loved one. Yeah. And even then, I think so many people struggle to even talk about finances with their spouse, let alone strangers on the internet. So for me, it actually I started sharing income reports back in 2019. So this was my second year in business at the time, and I've been doing it ever since. So we're coming on the close of 2022. So it's been 4 years of publicly sharing exactly what my company earns, spends, and profits. So down to the dollar, I'm sharing those details.
Really? I didn't know that. I just saw revenue, but I know that revenue can be misleading.
It is misleading, which is why I share such intimate details. And I do it not to brag, not to say, oh, look, like this is what we've done this quarter, because of course nothing is ever achieved alone in the first place. But for me, what I realized is, I think, especially because the majority of our audience are women, especially for women, money has traditionally been something that is just not shared among peers the way that it is for men. People talk about the old boys club, whatever that looks like. We have not, as women, been privy to those same conversations. In fact, it's kind of wild because if you even look back in recent US history, I learned recently, which was so alarming to me, that I think up until the 80s, women couldn't even take out a credit card in their own name. I mean, you just think, oh, that's, when we think about the past, we're like, oh, it's so long ago. That wasn't that long ago. I mean, that was what, 40?
I was born in the 80s.
Yeah, that was 40 years ago. And so I just think that we have come so far, but we still have so much further to go. And so for me, I just felt like if I could be an advocate for financial transparency, and if I could somehow normalize for even one person to feel more comfortable talking about money, I think we all win when transparency is at the core of the conversations. And I cannot tell you how many people from all across the world have shared with me in private DMs and emails and in-person conversations saying, thank you for being willing to talk about the things that people are not willing to talk about. Because you did this, I was, I asked for a raise. I realized I was severely undercharging and I increased my prices for my clients. I, had a hard conversation with my sister or my best friend, or I got out of debt, or I did, all these incredible ripple effects that would not have been possible had we just not had a conversation about this. And so for me, the discomfort, and sometimes it is, it doesn't get less scary the more you talk about it. It's still scary. Every time I hit record, I'm like, all right, so this quarter, this is what our business did, It doesn't get less scary, but those stories and those messages make it all worth it. To me, I would 100 times rather take on the 1 or 2 internet trolls that come at you and, are upset that you're sharing this stuff. I would rather deal with that if for the other women who are just benefiting from it. And I hope that, more and more people start to normalize this type of conversation, because I think when you make money a taboo, you attach too much meaning to something that is just meant to be a tool. Yeah. And I think so many of us grow up with all these different money stories because of the way that we were raised, whether we were raised with a lot of it or none of it, or just, you absorb these things from your parents and your family and how you grew up. And so for me, I think if you can shed those meanings and stop letting money be attached to your self-worth, or making money be about shame or guilt, and instead realize, okay, money is just a tool. We attach the meaning to money, and you can do great things with money and you can do really bad things with money. But if you can talk about it transparently and realize that you are the steward of it, then it removes the power that it has over you.
Yeah, I could see how that could build trust quickly. If you're willing to say, this is what I'm doing, that I could see how it's like, like you said it, so I might be willing to share that with you. I
actually had a friend of mine, Elise. She's a big fashion and travel blogger. She actually, through hearing my income reports, started sharing her own on her podcast. And there are very few bloggers. In fact, I don't even really know anyone besides her that shares that type of content. And she said she got a flood of messages from people being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you're putting this out on the internet. And so much gratitude from people who are like, thank you for being willing to speak up for us. It made me feel more comfortable, again, having a conversation. And I know it's not right for everyone. I know not every business can or wants to put that kind of sensitive information out there. But I think if it even allows you to open up maybe to your best friend or your partner, or, just teach your kids more about money and help them feel comfortable with talking about it, I think that is also a huge win.
Yeah, doing this, I personally have, because we all have our biases or whatnot, or when we see certain things. And so that was one thing when I saw on your content that I was like, man, I don't know if I would ever do that. And I am such a curious person, which is a big reason I'm doing all this. Like I was talking to my buddies today, because one of them was like, he was like, yeah, Trav, like you've always been curious. You've always just like wondered, like, why do you do that? Like, I don't even care if you got 10 or a million of them. Like, well, why do you do this? And what is your thought process behind that? And so now, like, I'm going into these things and like we've never met each other,
right?
And then I'm seeing just from a distance, and then I'm like, I wonder why that person does that, or I wonder. So that's been one of the big ones when I looked at your content. I was like, because I think like I'm like I would not do that, and then I'm like I wondered what that is, and then you describe why you do it, and then it gives me this new perspective, and I'm like, I didn't really think about it like that. Like I won't mention the name, but I had someone on here that I don't think I did this on camera. I think it was afterwards. But I asked the question about women and like bikini photos on social media. And I was like, why do you post some of those? Because I have why I think they might. And her response was very interesting to me. And I had never thought about, because she's on a fitness journey, and she's like, well, a few reasons. Number one, she was like, did you notice after that first one, what were the other things that were on there, which was healthy eating. So she was like, number one, I know what people click on and how do I want to get my real message across. So I was like, you know what? I didn't really put that together, but okay, I see that. And she was like, another thing is most of the content, I'm wearing the normal workout gear, yoga pants, whatever, but I also want, because she's primarily like after women, encouraging women and eating right and fitness. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to get some trolls with stupid comments, but whatever. Like what you're saying, like I'll get some trolls with this, but that's not why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And she said that with like bathing suit photos, it shows like, no, this is my body. Like I don't have like and this isn't my world, but like a suit that makes you skinnier or whatever, and makes you look a certain way. And like, I didn't even think about that. Like I have never worn something like that. So I was like, okay, like I see what you're saying by like, no, I worked for this. Like I'm showing you, this is actually what I look like. And so even that, where I came in with preconceived ideas of why someone might post something like that. And then I was like, man, I never thought about that. And so with your revenue, I was thinking the same thing, like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that I love about it is, to your point, like the reason we don't just share top line revenue is because, like you said, that can be very misleading. Especially because so much of business has to do with context. And if you don't share the context around a strategy, or even if you just look at someone's P&L, their profit loss statement, right? You might look and see, oh, wow, you were not profitable in this quarter or two. But what you might not see without the context or the story around it is maybe they went through an aggressive hiring season to prepare for the next 5 years, and they did take a loss in these 2 quarters, but in 2 years' time, it's going to come back to them tenfold. Without that context, if you just look at the numbers, you can make all sorts of wild assumptions and apply random things to your business that may not actually be applicable to you. So that's why for me, the podcasting format to share my income reports through has been so helpful, because I'm able to really share, okay, these were the numbers, but then let me explain to you what these numbers actually meant. What was the intention behind them? How is this impacting my business? What did I learn? What can you borrow? What should you not do?
Right.
So it really allows us to tell the full story. And just like the person that you were just mentioning, and how she inspires women by sharing photos of herself on her fitness journey, I think the same can be said for taking people with you on the business building journey, especially people who didn't grow up in environments or families where they ever had maybe a role model that built something from nothing and created this sort of income and impact and change generational wealth. If you're not role modeled that, how else could you ever expand your mind to see what is possible for you and see your full potential, unless you see someone else living it out in front of you? And so I think by sharing your story, you actually allow other people to be seen in their story,
I mean, essentially it's what I'm trying to accomplish with this conversation.
Exactly.
Right? Like I'm taking you humans and saying, okay, there's a chunk of people that see you as a certain thing and they follow you on business or whatever it is. But then let's try to give a bigger picture of who you are. And that's why, like, the most fun I have with this conversation is when we go, okay, now we've talked about all the business stuff. Now I want to learn about you and go back as far as you want. And, what makes you tick? Why are you doing this? What's your passion? What are some of the obstacles you've had? Why did you overcome them? How did you overcome them? That kind of stuff. Because, for me, when I watch documentaries and different kind of stuff, like, I love that. Don't get me wrong. I'm an entrepreneur. I have 2 other businesses, but what I personally really will spend time listening or watching is like, yo, what's their real story though? Like, why are they doing all this? Like, why do you love the media stuff? Why, you love helping these people. Kara said a lot of nice things about you. And then it's like, so where does that come from?
Oh my gosh. Well, where to start? There's a lot of
everyone says that.
I mean, I think my love for media stems from our shared love, actually, you and I, of storytelling. I just have always loved storytelling, whether it's me being the creator of a story and writing. I've always loved writing and reading from a very young age. I used to enter writing contests as a kid. And I have old, home videotapes that my mom recorded of me. She just, like, after school, I would come home and she would just set up a camcorder in the corner. And there's just hours long videos of me reading out loud to nobody. There's nobody there, right? It's like stuffed animals watching me, or my baby sisters. They didn't even, weren't able to really understand what I was saying at the time. But I just loved reading and creating stories and telling stories. And so I think what I do today is a very natural evolution of that. It's interesting because originally growing up, I always thought I was going to go to college for journalism. And that was my dream. I wanted to work in broadcast news. I wanted to especially work in entertainment news. And so I went to USC my freshman year down in LA to major in broadcast journalism. And I wanted to get into, behind the scenes, reporting on the red carpet, doing all these really cool things. And obviously that dream didn't come to fruition. I actually transferred back home to Oregon State my sophomore year for financial reasons, which we can totally talk about that journey too if you want. But to answer your original question, I just think that love of storytelling has evolved in the vehicles that I use to do that thing, but the passion has never changed. It's always been about, meeting interesting people and pulling out the nuggets like you love doing too on the show.
Yeah. And I mean, now this day and age, like, it's more accessible and there's more platforms than there's ever been. I mean, you got a few bucks, you can buy all this stuff. And then, Buzzsprout costs a little bit each month. But in general, like, Facebook is free, Instagram is free, LinkedIn is free. Like,
you can even podcast for free. I mean, you can literally talk into your voice notes app on your phone and upload to Anchor, and that's a free hosting platform. So pretty much anything you want to do, there's of course a paid version where you could have better quality like what you have set up here, but you can always find a more scrappy version if you need it. Yeah,
totally. So let's learn some more about you. Like, what's your story? And you've been here for 2 years. You were in Corvallis, you were at USC, but then you weren't. What is all that, and how did you get here today?
Sure. So I guess if you go all the way back, I moved to the U.S. when I was 3. So I'm a first generation, my parents are immigrants. I'm an immigrant. And we moved from China, where I was born, to Corvallis, Oregon, because my dad got a job at the university. So he worked in the College of Pharmacy for a number of years growing up. And so Corvallis was like a very idyllic place to grow up. It's a great community. I loved growing up in a college town, and felt very safe. Everyone was super welcoming. And I just loved the people and everything about growing up in that town. So, like I said, I always thought journalism was going to be my path. And so I remember I visited the USC campus my junior year of high school, and I just immediately fell in love. Like I told you, I'm someone who's very intuitively led. So when I know, I just know. And I remember just walking around campus and being like, this is where I'm meant to be. So that is actually how I ended up even going to USC. Is kind of a funny looking back. It wasn't funny in the moment, but so that was my dream school. I was obsessed, and I applied to that school and, a bunch of other schools, obviously, when it came time for college applications. I actually didn't even apply to OSU. So it's funny that I ended up graduating from there.
I was about to be like, yo, what about Oregon State?
Yeah, no, I totally wrote Oregon State off because I don't get me wrong. Like, I loved Oregon State growing up. I loved the Beavers, but for me, it was just, it's your hometown. So you're like, I got to get out of here. I can't go there. So anyways, I applied for USC, UCLA, a couple other schools in California and other places. And I ended up, I remember this clearly because I was on spring break with my best friend in Naples, which is so sad, by the way, what just happened there. Yeah. That condo that we stayed at, just got flooded. But anyways, I remember it clearly because it was at the same time one of the happiest weeks of my life and one of the saddest weeks of my life, because I remember I had this sinking feeling because the acceptance letter should have come by then if I had gotten accepted. And I kept watching other people start to post on social like, oh, I got in with my red pack and everything. So I finally remember my mom called me one day while I was over there, and she's like, okay, I got a letter from USC. And she's like, do you want me to open it? And I was like, oh, I think I already knew, like before she even opened, I was like, yeah, like let's just see what happened. And of course, it was a rejection letter. And I remember being so bummed that year because I got into UCLA. And that year, I remember like when we were looking at the stats, I was like, UCLA that year had like the highest a number of applications of like any university that year. And I was like, how the heck did I get in here? But USC rejected me. I was so pissed. I was like, why did this happen? How could this happen? And so being who I am, I was like, no, I can't take this no for an answer. So I actually went on Twitter and I found the director of admissions who I think it was like Kirk something. I remember I found him and I tweeted him, which is so silly. Like this was like 2012. So I tweeted him and I was like, hey, I heard, cause I had done some research. There were these, forums. I don't even know if they still exist, but it was called, I think it was like College Confidential. I might be misremembering that. But anyways, it was these bulletin boards where you could go online and like talk about like all these students would come together and be like, oh, we applied for this school and like, here's what got me in, or here are my SAT scores or my whatever, my extracurriculars. So I had heard that there was some sort of appeal process at USC. So I tweeted this guy and I was like, hey, I heard maybe through the grapevine that you guys have an appeal process. If I wanted to appeal my rejection letter, how would I go about doing that? And he actually sent me a link and he was like, this is the department you would write to. This is the letter. These are the things that we would be looking for. So all of this, happened. And then I ended up writing an appeal letter and, adding some additional things that maybe weren't on my original application. And in May of that year, I did actually get that rejection overturned and I got admitted as a spring admit at USC, which means that because they're based on the semester system, it would mean that I would start my freshman year in January instead of, in the fall with everybody else. And so I was ecstatic. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh, like my dream came true. So I went to USC, my dream school, for 6 months. And then I realized that, at the end of my freshman year, we started getting our financial aid letters for the following year. And I looked at the numbers that they gave me and projected out over the rest of my college career. I would have ended up with, I think, close to $200,000 in debt. Yeah. And I'm like, it was probably one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, because in that moment, I mean, I was 19. I didn't really know how this would impact my future, but I had to really look at myself in the mirror and go, is it really worth it? Like, am I willing to let go of this dream, or should I push through and, just whatever happens, like I'll figure out a way to pay off the debt later. But ultimately it was that instinctual feeling again, where I was like, no, you have to let this dream go. It'll come back to you in some other way, but you gotta put it to rest right now. So I transferred home to Oregon State. I got some great scholarships and, worked like 3 jobs all through college. And I actually, set out this kind of like hairy, audacious goal the summer of my junior year, right before entering into senior year of college at Oregon State. And by the way, when I transferred back to Oregon State, OSU didn't have a journalism program at the time. So I actually ended up switching my degree to exercise sports science, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything I do now. I literally just picked the major because one of my good friends going to college, that was her major. And I was like, that sounds like fun. And I was just getting into weightlifting at the time. So I was like, learning about the human body. And like, that sounds really interesting. Yeah. So I just went for it and I had no idea what I wanted to do with that degree. So ended up going down that path. And then the summer before my senior year, I looked at my student loan balance. And I think it was just shy of $20,000. And I don't know what overcame me, but I just decided, I was like, I am going to pay this off before I walk across the graduation stage. One way or the other, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do this. And I was still going to school full time. I was on my own. Like my parents weren't funding any part of my college or my bills. And so I ended up working 3 different jobs, and I actually pitched myself to get an internship at this fitness startup in Denver, or I guess they were in Denver at the time, but I pitched myself for an internship that turned into a paid internship. And that ended up being my first job actually out of college. But that job combined with my other local jobs, like serving at local restaurants and working at the movie theater, I actually did end up in about 10 months time paying off that entire $20,000. And I accomplished my goal, and I graduated college debt free. So that one decision, or I guess multiple decisions that led me to that point, I think that honestly shaped so much of how I'm here sitting with you today, because I think had my 19-year-old self not decided to give up my USC dream and my journalism dream, and had I not maybe done the crazy thing of being like, yeah, I'm going to work 3 jobs and go to school full time and pay off this $20,000 debt. If I didn't do those things, I don't think I would have had the financial stability or options when I was 23 to just quit my job without a backup plan, with nothing planned for whatever was next. I don't think I would have had the guts to do that had all those other things not taken place. So that was a really long-winded story. So I apologize if that really didn't answer your question, but that's
Well, no, I was thinking,
that's what happened.
I was thinking a few things, because I was like, okay, I got a couple things here. Number one, you said something and I thought, where have I heard that? The hairy audacious goal thing. Where's that from? Is that from something?
I
Did
know it's a
someone coin
saying.
that
It's
term?
yeah,
I've
it's
heard it
definitely
before,
a
and I was
saying.
like, who said that?
I don't know who said that. It wasn't my term. So I don't know. I don't know. Who
I
said
thought
that.
it was your friend who we were talking about earlier that writes books that my wife loves.
Oh, Rachel Hollis.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was one of like her terms.
No, I don't think it was hers originally,
Okay.
but I'm sure many people have said it in the past. Yeah.
The second thing, the USC story, that's so good because you got a rejection. I mean, this is kind of like the point of this conversation. This is stuff I like to hear. And rather than sulking or...
I did sulk. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
I did sulk, but
yeah,
but then
there was that. But rather than staying there, you decided to think outside of the box and use whatever tool that you might have access to, Twitter, and be like, I'm gonna lob out this tweet
to the director of admissions. Yeah, why not?
Like I love that. Like I've sent like so many, not so many, honestly, probably 5 right now, but like famous people direct messages like Gary Vee. I really want to get Ryan Reynolds on, who bought
I've been obsessed with Welcome to Wrexham. I've been watching the whole doc. Yes. Okay, we can talk about that.
So I hit Ryan. I was like, "Yo, whenever you're checking on that gin, bro, let me know."
Yeah. Oh yeah, he owns Aviation
That's what
Gin
I'm
in
saying.
Portland.
Like,
yeah,
he comes to Portland.
You're so true. Yeah, that's right.
A few other people that I'm just lobbing stuff out because, like, what do I got to lose?
Yeah.
So I love hearing that where you got some disappointment. Yeah, of course, like no one can not be disappointed, but like you didn't just stay there. You're like, what can I do? And not just what can I do, like outside of the box. Hit him with a tweet. He gives you all that information.
Yeah.
You get in. But then
I leave.
But then though, like to really be able to, especially at a young age, look down the road and be like, do I really want this? Is it really worth it? You know, that's the stuff I'm really trying to get out of these conversations. Like, you know, what did the person do? Why did they do it? What was their thought process with doing it? You know, because there's people out there. I mean, I probably wouldn't have thought about like, yo, let me tweet at this dude. You know what I mean? Like, but now I'm like, maybe I'll start tweeting at people. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So yeah, I was just with all the stuff you were saying, I was like, I love that. Where did you, and then the third thing was, I'm thinking, where did you get that from? Where did you, like, it seems like you'll overcome whatever gets thrown at you. Like, was that modeled to you? Like, I'm like, where'd you, cause that's a young age to be like, yo, I'm sad, but I'm going to tweet them. I'm going to keep pushing. I want that.
Yeah. I've done a lot of things like that in my life from a young age. And I'm not, to be totally honest, I am not sure where that came from. I mean, granted, I think, my parents were amazing role models of what it looks like to truly start over in a new country where my dad spoke English, but my mom, she didn't know anything other. I remember like as a little child, distinctly this one odd memory. I don't know why this stuck in my brain, but like taking ballet as a kid, and if a mom picking up their kid from the same class would try to have, make small talk with my mom. I remember there was literally a time in her life where the only sentence she knew how to say was like, I don't speak English. I'm so sorry. If you have a question, call my husband at, and then she would literally like regurgitate our home phone number. And that was like her response to everything. And so I remember those moments. And I think watching the bravery of seeing two people just build from scratch. And I just think it's a common story for a lot of first generation immigrants. It's that, it's just that scrappy mentality, I think. So I'm sure some of that was absorbed, as a kid, but
that's funny how quickly you downplayed that's a common immigrant story.
Yeah.
Cause like for me, I have no idea what that's like. Like I'm sitting here being like, that it's not common to me. Like I know in your world, you're feeling like this is common. To me, I'm like, not in my like
my mom didn't go around saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. I had it easy. Like I look how I look. And so, it's just interesting how like you like downplaying something that's like, no, you guys like came over here, because I've had a few other people kind of the same deal.
Yeah.
And they kind of downplayed it too. Actually, my buddy, who I haven't put his out yet, because I told you the camera's turned off.
Oh yeah,
but he's from Africa, and it was funny how he'd just be like, "Oh, this." I'm like, "Yo, that's actually not normal."
Yeah.
Like what you just said. Like, I'll tell you about how I was raised.
Yeah.
That's the normal around here. What you just said, and he just acted like, because that's all he knew.
Yeah.
That was his life. This is how I was brought up. So like you saying that, it's just interesting. Like you're like, and I'm like, no, like they came over to another country built from nothing.
Yeah.
Like that's.
What they've done is, truly so impressive. My dad especially, because, his upbringing, he grew up dirt poor in rural China during like the Cultural Revolution, which is on like a whole other level. And so for him to pull himself up from absolute obscurity in like the poorest parts of a village where like you might have like a dirt floor, and to study his way through university to then he moved to Paris to pursue his doctorate. So then he had to learn French and like lived there for 7 years. And then he got his visa application accepted to come move to America. So then had to learn English all the way through. And so, just things that I personally don't know if I could or ever would even attempt to do something like that. And so I definitely feel very inspired and very indebted to my parents. But yeah, growing up as an immigrant child, it is different because I think you mature very quickly, because you, in many ways, are helping your parents navigate a new world. Because, for most of my life, actually all of my life, I guess my English proficiency has obviously been better than my mom's because I went to school here.
Yeah.
I do remember going to preschool when I first moved here, and of course I didn't speak English either at that point. I do remember there was this one moment where I really had to go to the bathroom and I didn't know how to say I need to use the restroom because I didn't speak English. And so that was kind of interesting. But I do remember so many times growing up, like I was the one who would come home as like a 7, 8, 9-year-old and be like, all right, Mom, we're going on a field trip on Friday. This is the check I need you to write. I would write out the check, be like, you sign here, here's the form, sign here. Or like just as a kid, like if there was a problem with a credit card or a bill, like I'm the one on the phone as a 9-year-old being like, hey, my parents have a problem with this bill and I need to negotiate it, and like whatever it is. And so you just mature very quickly because you are in many ways like a voice for their outside world. And so you kind of have to be an advocate for them. So yeah.
So you just answered my question.
Yeah.
When I say, did you, what, because that's how like you were raised, like you had to do that. Like, cause I'm thinking about my daughter and I'm like,
You gotta hand the phone over to her.
Yeah, like she wouldn't know how to pay one of the bills, or like I'm handing everything,
Yeah.
like. So that's what I was looking for, like, because I would never think like that, because I didn't have to, hey, this is how you say that, or call someone for my parents, or, my typical, if you will, upbringing was, no, they were the parent. They did all those things. They taught me how to do it. So that's, I mean, you were troubleshooting as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, it was great. It was great practice. And I think it did give me maybe a little bit more, what is the word? I guess maybe resilience of hearing no. Like, I think I've been in my life less afraid of putting myself out there and making the ask, because I realized really early on, like, if you don't make the ask, the answer is always no. So why not make the ask? If it's no, then it was the same thing to begin with. So really, what did you lose there? So yeah, I've done all sorts of crazy things as a kid. I remember one time I cold called the Miss Universe organization in New York, and this woman picked up and was like, "Hello, who are you? Like, how may I direct your call?" And I remember I literally said something like, I would like to interview Miss USA, and I need to get in touch with the person who I would schedule that with. And they put me through because they just thought that like I was legit, but I didn't have anything. I mean, like, it was like some random blog or, whatever. And so I've made all sorts of things. I mean, I remember as a kid, I wrote into Scholastic because I was like, oh, how does someone become an author? Like, I guess you go pitch your book. So I was like, I'll just do that. I'll find an email. I'll find a letter. I'll go, send it out. And I've done so many things over the years where I just make the ask, because to your point, a lot of people filter themselves out from opportunities because they think, oh, I have to be this type of person, or, I'm a nobody. Why would anyone give me the time of day? But what surprised me the most is I think some of the busiest, most successful people in the world have actually been the most responsive compared to other people who you would think maybe perhaps you would actually have a better chance of hearing back from. They've actually been less responsive. And I remember like a good example of that is one time I used to read Teen Vogue as a teenager, and there was this Teen Vogue online had this contest where you could, I don't even remember what it was. They had some kind of brand campaign with Essie, which is like a nail polish brand, and you could enter to win a free nail polish. So I did. And because very few people entered, because of course people are like, why would I enter a giveaway? I never win those. So people again filter themselves out. So I filtered myself in, and I was like, I'll take the nail polish. So she sent me, I remember at the time, Eva Chen, she was the director of beauty for Teen Vogue. So she sent me the nail polish in the mail, and there was a little note from her like, congrats, just something small. And I actually ended up finding her email, and I reached out to her and I said, hey Eva, like, thank you for the nail polish. I really appreciate the gift. I was wondering, I'm going to be visiting, my family's going to New York next summer. And I was wondering, while I'm in New York, could I come by to the Teen Vogue offices and get a tour? Like, would I be able to meet you in person? I thought, absolutely no way this person is responding. Like, it's probably going to go in the junk mail, or her assistant's going to read it and be like, nope, who is this kid? Absolutely not. She actually reached back out and was like, yeah, when are you in town? And just like as if it was such a normal thing for someone to ask. And unfortunately, with that particular story, the week that we happened to be in town, she was actually out of town, so she couldn't host us. But had she been in town, who knows what could have happened from that, just because I made the ask. So make the ask.
Yeah. Filter yourself in. I haven't heard that term, but that's what's sticking with me. With people are filtering themselves out, but filter yourself in. Yeah. Okay, so then you're back here, Oregon State. And then you get a corporate job.
So there was one job in between. So what happened was, when I switched to exercise sports science, very early on. So at Oregon State, when you go that particular degree route, you have to do a series of practicums, which are basically just unpaid internships. And everybody else in my class would do internships with like physical therapists, or I don't know, the athletic team, or at a gym, or whatever it is. But I knew from the get-go, I was like, I don't want to be a personal trainer. I don't want to go to med school. I don't want to be a nurse. I don't want to be a physical therapist. But I still had that love for storytelling and media. So I thought, okay, what if I worked on the marketing side of fitness? And so I actually at that time, because I was getting into weightlifting, like I mentioned, I bought this program, this fitness program from a fitness startup up or over in Colorado. And it was a team of fitness coaches. And I noticed that they were very inconsistent with their blog and their YouTube content. And so I, again, just randomly reached out via DM and pitched myself and said, hey, I noticed that, X, Y, and Z in your company, you're lacking this piece. Do you have an internship program? And they came back and said no. And then once again, I think this would be the takeaway that I hope most people would get is most people hear and know, and they immediately go, okay, that's the end of the road. But I think oftentimes no is just the start of the conversation. It's just like what you proposed is a no, but that doesn't mean that that's the only path. So like, is there something else that could make it a yes? And if you're willing to think that way and start to ask those questions, you'd be so amazed by the opportunities that come out. So I said, okay, well, what if I said, I understand you don't have an internship program, but would you be willing to give me, I think it was like a 10-week run or something. I was like, would you be willing to give me a 10-week test run? I'll work for you X amount of hours. Each week, I'll create this content for you for free. And if I do a good job, would you be willing to consider having me on in a more involved role? And of course, I mean, they weren't going to turn down free labor. So they were like, sure, like you can create this content for us. So I did it.
Which, before you keep going,
yes,
the whole free thing has been a pretty common theme on here. With some people that are now very, very successful, the beginning part of their journey, the giving something for free has almost been every single one of their stories getting started.
Yeah. I think you have to give value before you make an ask, right?
Yeah.
Because it's much easier for someone to say yes after you've already shown up for them in some way. So you always have to think of it from the perspective of what's in it for them, not what's in it for me. So yeah, I love that you brought that point out. But yeah, I mean, that internship very quickly evolved. And by the time I was in my senior year, like I mentioned, when I had set out this goal to graduate college debt free, I was able to secure a part-time paid job with them as their PR and marketing coordinator, which I had no business having that title because I was just a student, but I had all these ideas and I brought all of these new campaigns and initiatives to their business because I was just so excited to get to create, and being creative was, it just fills me up. And so I did that. And then upon graduation, they offered me a full-time position, remote. And so I kind of started work in a very unconventional path. And I graduated college in 2016. So even though that was not that long ago, it was still a very different world than it is now. And it was not common to work remotely. And it was very strange, that kind of entry into the job world. And so I had that job for about a year. And then I actually got laid off at the end of that year because they did a complete restructuring of the company and they let go of almost all of their staff. And so then that's when I ended up applying and getting that corporate job for the big healthcare system in Corvallis. And I was a marketing coordinator for probably the most boring topic ever, Medicaid, Medicare. Did marketing for IHN. So that was fun times. But yeah, I mean, I just knew on day one when I sat in that cubicle, it wasn't for me. And everybody kept telling me, you have to at least last a year. It's going to look bad if you have a resume gap. You just got to push through. But something inside me just said, I don't think that staying here longer is going to change how I feel about this. So why would I waste my life just so I can check a box off and say, done, worked here for a year so that it looks better for my resume? So I don't know. I couldn't justify that. So I quit after 10 months, and it was a couple of days before Christmas. And I remember I clocked out that day, went to a dentist appointment, and then that was all my plans. I had no other plans. So after that, I just, started applying for jobs. I thought I was going to move to Portland. I was still living in Corvallis at the time. But I ended up, like I said, getting that freelance client, and that set in motion everything that has led me to right now. Yeah.
Man, I see why Jacob told me to have you on.
Oh.
when I was driving up last night with my friends, one of them asked me, they were like, hey, have you ever thought about doing a podcast with another person? And I was like, yeah, actually I have, but I only want to do it with a female.
To offer a different perspective, or
that's
why?
That's what I said. I was like, as I'm interviewing these ladies, like what we talked about with the engagement on social media, and how it just seems like you guys do a better job than we do with saying like, hey, good job, like saying it, like acknowledging it. And so I said last night, I was like, yeah, if I ever did that, I'd want to do it. It's just different perspective. Like, I don't know. It's just a different, as I'm interviewing ladies, especially entrepreneurs, and seeing how they're thinking and whatnot. And, yeah, I was like, so maybe down the road one day you and I do something together.
That would be so fun. Same as you, I just love getting to meet different people and hear about their stories. There's so many surprises under the surface, and I don't know, it takes a quality interviewer though, I think, to pull those pieces out. So just want to give kudos to you for doing such a great job with that.
I appreciate that. That's a weird, it's a weird quality to think about. Like I've told most people on here when I talk about my wife that it's like the running joke that when we meet people, she'll be like, Trav, you get people to say stuff that you've never met. Like, it's weird. Like they just
open up to you.
They'll just start, and we've joked about superpowers. My faith system would say gifts, that you're just gifted with. But it's a strange thing to think about that as a talent or a gift. Because I know a lot of people, and I've always thought, like, how could I leverage that? And I like talking about my people, and I like promoting my people.
You're a connector, which is also a gift.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And I do just want to say, I feel like even in what you told me earlier, I was downplaying my immigrant upbringing. I think you're downplaying the gift of being able to ask really interesting questions and really harness curiosity in a really meaningful way. Because to me, one of the things that business has actually taught me is that the quality of the questions you ask will dictate your success. And it's really interesting because when I meet people who are struggling in business, oftentimes it's even evident in the types of questions they ask. They ask very surface level questions that point to a quick fix or a hack or a tactic, but they're not stepping back and asking a higher quality question, which results in a completely different, pathway. And so I just want to say that I think it's a huge gift to be able to ask really high quality questions.
Yeah, no, that's super cool to hear. As I've been trying to, I guess, learn this about myself, I've shared this story a few times that I was working for a bigger insurance agency, and one of the owners called me in to her office and had the conversation with me about my new business sales numbers that weren't great. And her and the other owners were like trying to figure me out, and they're like, all right, Trav, like everyone loves you, like coworkers, you get along so well. And we're trying to figure out why that's not translating into new business. Like, what is it? Because you can connect so well with people. And she's like, we think we figured it out with you. And this was good feedback because I had never thought about this. But she was like, we think that you're not really sold on what you're selling, the insurance. We think that you don't really believe that you're helping people when you cold call them, because I hate cold calling for insurance. I hate it. Now I'm doing a ton of cold calling, if you will, for the podcast, but now I'm learning like what she said back then years ago is so true, because she was like, we've learned with you that if you don't think you're helping, you're not really going to do it.
You're not motivated.
You're not like, and I was like, the more I thought about that, I was like, that's so true, because I can be super convincing and influential when I really believe in the thing, and especially if I think I'm helping some way. And so like taking that into this, it's so easy for me to talk about the podcast. And so I've tried to like, how can I create something to use those strengths?
Yeah.
To really use those strengths of, because in sales, like in a lot of different type of sales, but you know, insurance, I'll speak to that. You know, they're usually like, yo, don't sit and talk for an hour. Like get in there, knock it out, get going. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to have some kind of other conversation other than the policy or selling it. And, you know, I'm just figuring out like how I'm wired and what really gets me going. Like I told my buddy who spoke this morning, I was like, yo, you know, driving all this way and this with you and listening this morning, I was like, I'm working on policies right now that will put money in my pocket. I would rather be watching you speak. Like the feeling I get, I'd rather be doing that, supporting my buddy, than making money from the policies. And so this podcast is such a way for me to get, you got to make money. Like I get it. And the insurance business is a great business to be in. Quite frankly, the model of insurance, how it renews, and you know, you sell a house, you got to go sell a new house. Where with insurance, you just got to retain the client, and then it rolls over, and you know, get more clients. So I love the model and whatnot. But in terms of like how I'm figuring out how I'm really wired, like this gives me that.
Yeah.
This gives me the ability, like, to ask these questions and have the setting for that. But I never really looked at that as a major, I don't know, skill set in terms of, and I even get a little nervous with saying the term interview, because I'm getting people that are like, yo, what are you going to ask me? And then I'm like, well, I don't know.
It's a conversation.
Like, I don't have actual questions. Like wherever you go, I'm going to follow, and then we'll just go somewhere together.
Yeah. Do you watch The Office? Are you a fan? Oh, okay. I was going to quote a Michael Scott quote at you, but never mind.
But I'm sure a lot of people that watch or listen to this do.
Well, I was just going to say, it just kind of reminds me of when he's like, I just start a sentence and I don't know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way or whatever, like that. I mean, it's kind of that idea, right? Yes. It's like, I don't know where we're going, but let's just see what spills out. Yeah.
That's how these conversations go. Like, I don't know where it's going to go. All I know is the way I think, that I know I can keep the conversation going. That's all I know. I don't know where it's going to go and what I'm going to ask, but I think I'm a good listener too.
Yes. I think that's key to great conversations. And I think it's not even just listening to the words that someone is saying, but being able to read the person and knowing when to lean in and push a little bit harder, and when to pull back and be like, okay, maybe they're not quite there yet. Yeah. And finding a different angle. This random experience, like, I mean, we talked about, you know, all the random things that I did throughout my childhood making the ask, but this one just popped in as you were saying, talking about, you know, really reading someone. When I was 16, MTV came to our school for a casting call for a reality show that they ran for, I mean, over a decade. I don't know if you ever grew up watching Made. It was a reality show. Yeah. I was on Made in high school. And the reason we got that show is because when we went to the casting call, I was sitting across from the producer, and I went in with this vision, because basically the audition was you went in and they asked you, like, what do you want to be made into? And you share your dream and like why you want to do that and whatever. And so for me, you know, like I said, I wanted to be a red carpet correspondent. I wanted to major in broadcast journalism. So I went in and I said, I want to be made into an entertainment news anchor or whatever it was. And, you know, they asked me a couple questions about why I wanted to do that, what was standing in my way. And I could just tell, like, as we were talking, like in the motion of like words were coming out of my mouth, but I could see like the lights where like it wasn't sparking for this producer. And I was like, okay, I think I literally like stopped mid-sentence and I was like, but you know, also, I was like, but also we have this, like, I was a co-captain of the dance team along with some of my best friends in high school. And this program had really suffered over the years because lack of funding, and the coaches would change every single year. And so there was never any, continuation, no real team building. So because of that, the team had always had a hard time recruiting people with actual dance backgrounds. And it was always like bringing in freshmen who had zero dance background, which, as you know, dance is a very artistic type of thing. So if you have no experience, you're not obviously going to perform very well as a team and be competitive enough to, gain the accolades that you need for the school support. So all this to say, I kind of just threw it out there because I was like, well, obviously this direction is not like, it's not lighting him up. And I was like, what if I just threw this thing out and just see how he reacts? And it was so interesting. Like, Trav, I swear, like the second I switched that to that angle and I was like, well, also we're on a dance team and, we've been really struggling over the last however many years. I was a junior at this point. You could just see it was like a light bulb went on. He was like, tell me more. Like, tell me about how terrible this program is and all the things that you guys are struggling with. And I remember leaving that auditorium and I was like, I think I have a really good feeling about this one. And we ended up getting an email from MTV and they said, we loved your pitch. We're going to fly out a producer and do a green light. They're going to follow you guys around for 3 days, film the content, bring it back to our New York offices. And then if that green light gets approved, we're flying out a crew for a whole 6 weeks and we're going to film you. And then that's what ended up happening. So that was a wild experience, especially growing up in a small town where things like that just don't happen. But again, it was one of those things where you have to just be able to like know in that moment when to lean in and go, okay, I'm just going to make the ask. And even if it makes no sense, we'll just see, we'll just see where it goes.
I notice when I've been doing this, I would say almost every person, this is like, because I've been thinking like, what are some of the common themes and what are some of the, as like you're close to like the 20th person that I've, had on. And it's like, I'm getting enough people to say, okay, what are some of the common things that are talked about or body language or whatever. And one thing I will say is that I usually almost always notice is the moment I usually lead it from the business to now tell me about yourself personally. It's interesting how people's body language changes, their face. It's a whole different disposition when someone goes, now I'm going to talk about myself.
It's a lot harder, right? It feels more vulnerable. Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
way easier to like business stuff and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Here's how this works. And, but that's something that like, I haven't actually voiced that to anyone yet, but now that I'm seeing it, I'm like, I always like, me personally, I'm thinking, I can't wait till we transition because I'm going to watch your face, your mouth, your eyes, your body, because pretty much every single person, the moment it shifts, there's some kind of
like a change in their aura. Yeah.
There's just something that changes about that, which tells me like that there's something there with this conversation.
Yeah.
There's something there with this personal, like the last guy I had on, I think it was after we were done recording, we were just sitting talking or maybe it was when we were recording, but he was like, because I kept asking some more questions on like, okay, you said as a kid you always did this, but like, where'd that come from? Like, where do you think that came from? And then he started really thinking back and then brought up something he totally hadn't even like, oh, I lived in Philadelphia. Oh, well, you hadn't said that yet as a kid. And then he's like, man, I haven't really thought about a lot of these things like until you've been like pulling it out of me, asking me. And then it was like a trip down memory lane for him. And he was like, man, this was really like, I really enjoyed you taking me there.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely like, that's something for me that I'm learning, taking people, back to like these memories that some of them are like, man, I haven't thought about this in years, so this podcast has been, I was telling my friends on the trip, that one of the things, this is probably the biggest thing that I really did not think through as I started all this was how it would impact the person sitting there. I thought about how it might impact your business, or things outside of these walls. But I never really thought about like what your experience will be here with me.
Right.
And that's been super cool with some of the stuff that people have said about coming and sharing 2 hours with me here, that's been probably one of the biggest things that has been filling my cup. Is I never really thought, because I really only viewed it as like, hey, we'll try to put your business on, not what is this personally doing for you as we talk about all this stuff. And I'm like, with my wife, we have a really good relationship and we talk about everything. And so I'm not a guy that feels like I don't get to like really go deep that often, because I do. Like, I have a person that like we talk about everything. But I realize not everyone has something like that, or not everyone has someone in their life that's saying like, yo, tell me about yourself. Like, tell me like all your stuff. Like, I want to hear. But I think we're all wired to like want to share our story, like want someone to hear us.
Absolutely.
Listen to us.
I think that's so true. I mean, I think, it's what do they say? Like, anthropology tells us storytelling is the first type of communication, right? It's like the oldest form of like human connection. And I think there's something about having someone who's a really engaged listener, who's willing to kind of give you the space to explore wherever you may go in your mind with these different things. I think that is really powerful. So yeah, I love that you've created this experience for people sitting in the chair.
Well, thank you for coming by. I was, like I said earlier, like, I'm being real with you. Like, I might have rescheduled, but I was like, nope, I woke up this morning in Long Beach, Washington. I'd never been there before, but I was like, no, I want to do this. I wanted to have this conversation with you. So, and thanks for being flexible with me, because I felt bad. I haven't switched the time on anyone yet. And then when you hit me with the like, yo, you want to just do it at 3:00? I'm in the car with my friends and I'm like, oh man, this so like, I was feeling like so bad. Relief, like, I was feeling so bad because I asked you to come do this.
Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, the pleasure was all mine. And I think, again, I'm so glad you made the ask, because I think we make so many assumptions about what the other person might think or feel or whatever, but it's just all projections in your head. So I find that most of the time when we ask for a little extra grace or help from people, that they're more than willing to accommodate, but we just make it mean something about ourselves if we can't.
Well, when I asked you, you had, I want to say you were like, oh yeah, I watched something. And then I was like, oh, I didn't know you saw anything that I've done. Yeah. Like, I was like, oh, okay. And then Malik, that was on here, when he came in, he was so funny because, like, Kara, he was like, bro, I was trying to figure out who you are and what, because when he first walked in, my height, he was like, yo, like, I think he had heard my voice but never seen me. And he was like, I guess I didn't think you'd be that tall. and so he was like trying to figure out what I looked like. And he was like, yo, I was trying to figure out how you know all these people, because I know almost every single person you've had on. So I was like, who is this dude that knows all these people in this community? And then he was like, the quality was on point. And he was like, I saw this person and this person and this person on there. And then I was thinking, how are they on this podcast? I want to be on this podcast. And he was like, I was just about to reach out to you, and then you sent me a message about being on.
Wow. Talk about synergy, right?
It was like, it was a trip. And so, I mean, there's so much, just the ask. I mean, as I'm lobbing out stuff to people, I've only had a few people, honestly, that it was a bit outside their comfort zone to do this. But thus far, I mean, most everyone's like, yeah, I'll totally do it. So yeah, I mean, just ask.
Yeah, just ask. And I would say, like, that's the homework for everyone listening this week, is just make one ask that you might not have done and just see what happens, you know? So that's really powerful. And I am really glad that you invited me to be on here. Thank you. And what I love about your show is, because I am newer to Salem, most of your guests that you've had on, I actually don't know. And so it's kind of a fun way for me to learn about new people and new business owners. Not new. I mean, they've been in the area much longer than I have, but new to me. Right. And so, I think the only two people that I actually do personally know that you've had on are Kara and Jacob. And so, and they were like two of my like first friends here in Salem. So it's just worked out perfectly that, that we were able to connect through them. So
I'm planning on, and I don't think I've actually said this on air, but what I would like to do is do an annual get together for whoever up until that point has been on the show. And I think the first spot we'll have it at Gary's, his apparel place. But my thinking was, is just kind of doing, probably adults only, no kids, keep it somewhat, a little businessy, because a lot of the people that are on are business owners, but doing some kind of little like food, drink, music. And then he has the apparel shop. So we talked about, if you want, you can make your own, the chair hoodie.
Oh, cute.
Or whatever,
Yeah,
and
I
let
like
people
that.
like press their own thing and see how they do it.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, everyone always thinks like what they do is so like normal and casual or whatever, and I'm like, yo, I don't make t-shirts, so I know you print and dry all the time, but I haven't done that. So like, yeah, I made my own hoodie.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm looking forward to doing is, as this grows, is, and kind of like what you're doing with your ladies and whatnot, is building a community that people have been on, and then holding, maybe annual get-togethers, and then y'all can be like, yo, I saw this episode, and you have, and then maybe people are working together, or maybe people become friends or whatever. That whole connection thing. Like I got a friend that, and she probably will never listen to any of these, but she was like, Trav, why do you want to know everybody? And I was like, I don't know, but I just want to know everybody. Like, I want to know everyone that owns every business around here, and I just do. And
well, life is more full with friendships and connections. So I would totally come to that get together, and I think that's so smart, and it's a huge advantage of you having a more locally based podcast where you have the ability to do that. So and what's interesting is, I know this is really supposed to be the wrap up of the interview, so this will be my last thought that I share.
Worries.
But I do feel that oftentimes when people feel like they're reaching maybe out to somebody that they feel like, oh, this person is so much more successful than me, like what possible value could I bring to them? I think even what you just mentioned of, if you got everyone from the show who's been on the show together and we were able to, connect with one another, fostering connections between people, introducing people to each other is actually one of the highest value adds that you can give someone. And it's one of the easiest things to do, even if you come from nothing, right? Like if you're just brand new trying to build a name for yourself or build relationships, like if you can introduce someone to someone else, their mutual starting point will always be you. Yeah. And people don't forget that. And so I think that would just be a little tip that came to mind of how you can add value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It was so fun. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you.